Both engines dead. 289 people falling toward the Atlantic. Then the Black Hawks heard it, call sign Shark, I'm landing on water. They couldn't believe it. Shark, the Navy's most legendary pilot, was dishonorably discharged 18 months ago. She wasn't supposed to exist. But she's the only one who can save them. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. Jordan Hayes sat in seat 14B, squeezed between a businessman who wouldn't stop typing and a woman sleeping against the window. Middle seat, economy class. The worst spot on Atlantic Airlines Flight 229 from Boston to London. She was 38 years old, wearing faded jeans and a gray hoodie that had seen better days. Her dark blonde hair was tied back in a simple ponytail. A worn paperback thriller sat open on her lap, but she hadn't turned a page in 20 minutes. The words blurred together. She couldn't concentrate. Nobody on this plane knew who she was. Nobody recognized her face. Nobody knew that 18 months ago, she'd been Commander Jordan "Shark" Hayes, one of the most decorated pilots in the U.S. Navy. The businessman in 14C was working on some kind of financial spreadsheet, his fingers hammering the keyboard with aggressive efficiency. He wore an expensive suit and cologne that was too strong. He'd already elbowed Jordan twice while adjusting his laptop. Hadn't apologized either time. The woman in 14A, probably in her 60s, gray hair, comfortable traveling clothes, had fallen asleep before takeoff. She had a gentle face. Reminded Jordan of her mother. For 12 years, Jordan had hunted submarines across every ocean on Earth. She'd flown the P-8 Poseidon, a massive maritime patrol aircraft designed to find things that didn't want to be found. The Poseidon was based on the Boeing 737 platform but packed with sophisticated sensors, sonar buoys, torpedoes, and surveillance equipment that cost more than most people would earn in 10 lifetimes. 347 missions. She'd tracked enemy vessels invisible to satellites. Located submarines hiding in thermal layers that confused sonar. Coordinated rescue operations in storms that grounded every other aircraft in the fleet. Her call sign, Shark, came from her instincts. She could sense threats beneath the waves before her instruments detected them. She could feel when something was wrong with her aircraft before any gauge showed trouble. Other pilots called it supernatural. Some joked she had sonar instead of blood. Jordan just called it paying attention, really paying attention, to every sound, every vibration, every subtle change in how the aircraft felt. She'd saved lives. Dozens of them. When a Russian submarine got stuck in fishing nets off the coast of Norway, Jordan was the pilot who located it in zero visibility. When a training exercise went wrong and an American sub lost power in the Philippine Sea, Jordan coordinated the rescue that saved 23 sailors. The Navy loved her for it. Put her on recruiting posters. Featured her in promotional videos, gave her medals and commendations. She'd been interviewed by admirals. Shook hands with the Secretary of the Navy. Until the day she told the truth. It happened during what should have been a routine training mission. A P-8 Poseidon went down off the coast of California. 3 sailors died in the crash. Jordan was assigned to investigate because of her expertise and experience. She found the real cause within 48 hours, faulty maintenance from a defense contractor called Daedalus Systems. They'd falsified inspection records on critical hydraulic systems to save time and money. The parts they certified as inspected and operational had never been properly examined. One of those parts failed at altitude. The plane went down. Daedalus Systems had a $7 billion contract with the Navy. Powerful friends in Washington, lobbyists, political connections that reached all the way to Congress. Jordan's superiors, men she trusted, men she'd served under for years, called her into a private meeting. They told her very calmly to change the report. Blame pilot error instead. Say the crew made mistakes. Bury the contractor's negligence. 3 sailors died, Jordan had said. Their families deserve the truth. The Navy deserves to maintain its relationship with Daedalus, her commanding officer replied. This is bigger than 3 sailors, Commander. This is about national security contracts. Jordan refused. She filed her report exactly as the evidence showed. Contractor negligence, falsified inspections, corporate fraud that killed 3 people. 2 weeks later, the Navy dishonorably discharged her for insubordination and conduct unbecoming an officer. They didn't just fire her. They destroyed her. Took her commission. Took her pension, 12 years of service erased. Took her reputation. Leaked stories to defense industry publications suggesting she was unreliable, emotional, couldn't handle pressure. Daedalus Systems kept their contract. Nobody went to jail. The 3 sailors' families were told their sons and husbands died due to pilot error. For 18 months after the discharge, Jordan lived in a tiny studio apartment in Boston's South End. 500 square feet. A bed, a desk, a hot plate. She could hear her neighbors through the walls. Smell their cooking. Hear their arguments. She worked as a maritime safety consultant. It was the only job her skills qualified for after the discharge. She wrote risk assessments for shipping companies. Reviewed safety protocols, made recommendations that companies usually ignored because implementing them cost money. She flew commercial now. Economy class. No uniform. No rank. No respect. Just another passenger. Today she was flying to London for a job interview with a shipping company called North Atlantic Maritime. They needed someone to review their fleet safety procedures. The pay was okay, not great, but it was steady work. The interview probably wouldn't amount to anything. They'd probably hire someone with better credentials, someone without a dishonorable discharge on their record. But she had to try. Had to keep moving forward, had to believe that somewhere, eventually, things would get better. The plane hit some light turbulence. The businessman grabbed his laptop to steady it. The sleeping woman didn't stir. The seatbelt sign dinged on. Jordan closed her eyes and tried to relax. Tried to stop thinking about the Navy. About the career she'd lost. About the 3 sailors whose deaths she tried to honor by telling the truth. Then she smelled it. Fuel vapor, faint but distinct, mixed with something chemical, something wrong. Her eyes snapped open. Every instinct from 12 years of maritime patrol kicked in instantly. Assess the situation. Diagnose the problem. React appropriately. Most passengers wouldn't notice the smell. It was subtle. Easy to miss if you weren't trained. But Jordan had spent thousands of hours flying over open ocean in aircraft where one mechanical failure meant you were swimming in freezing water, waiting for rescue that might never come. She'd learned to recognize every warning sign. Hydraulic leaks had a specific smell, sharp, acrid. Fuel contamination smelled different, chemical, slightly sweet. Engine stress produced a particular kind of vibration you could feel through the airframe. And right now, something was very wrong with Flight 229's engines. She closed her book and started listening. Really listening. The cabin noise was normal at first. The steady hum of jet engines at cruise power, conversations around her. A baby crying somewhere in the back, the businessman's keyboard clicking. But underneath all that, Jordan heard something else. The left engine's pitch was slightly off. Not much. Just a small fluctuation in the normal sound. The kind of thing only someone with thousands of hours of flight time would notice. The businessman wouldn't hear it. The sleeping woman wouldn't hear it. The flight attendants probably wouldn't hear it either. But Jordan heard it. And it was getting worse. The pitch roughened. Fluctuated. The engine was struggling with something. Fuel flow, probably, maybe contamination, maybe a pump failure. Jordan unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up. Her heart was beating faster. Adrenaline starting to flow. The flight attendant, a young woman with bright lipstick and a professional smile, name tag reading, Lisa, immediately started walking toward her from the galley. "Ma'am, please remain seated with your seatbelt fastened," Lisa said in that practiced-friendly tone. "We're experiencing some minor turbulence." Jordan kept her voice calm and low. "Your left engine is failing. I can hear it. You need to alert the pilots right now." Lisa's smile faltered slightly, but she maintained her composure. "Ma'am, I'm sure everything is fine. Our pilots are very experienced, and all our aircraft are maintained to the highest." "I flew P-8 Poseidons for 12 years, Jordan interrupted quietly. "Maritime patrol aircraft. I know what engine failure sounds like. That left engine has irregular fuel flow. Alert the cockpit. Now. Please." Lisa hesitated. She was trained to handle drunk passengers, medical emergencies, and people freaking out about turbulence. But a woman calmly insisting the engine was failing? That wasn't in the manual. Before Lisa could respond, the plane lurched violently to the left. A massive explosion ripped through the left wing. A sound like a cannon firing. Flames shot out from the engine nacelle, visible through the windows, bright orange and yellow against the gray sky. Passengers started screaming. The plane shook. Oxygen masks dropped from the overhead compartments, dangling on their rubber hoses. The left engine had just catastrophically failed. Captain Rebecca Torres gripped the control yoke with both hands as the Boeing 767 yawned hard to the left. The sudden loss of thrust from the left engine was trying to spin the aircraft. The asymmetric power wanted to roll them into a deadly spiral. She'd been flying for 28 years. 14,000 hours in the air. She'd handled engine failures before during simulator training and once, just once, during an actual flight when a bird strike took out an engine on approach to Denver. This was serious, but it was a scenario she'd trained for. Manageable. Left engine fire. First Officer Michael Park shouted from the right seat. He was already running through the engine fire checklist, his hands moving across switches and buttons with practiced precision. Years of training taking over. Michael was ex-Air Force. He'd flown C-17 cargo planes before transitioning to commercial aviation. 8,500 hours of flight time. Cool under pressure. Rebecca trusted him completely. Fire warning light confirmed, Michael continued, his voice steady despite the adrenaline. Shutting down left engine. Pulling fire handle. He pulled the red T-shaped handle. It disconnected fuel, hydraulics, and electrical power to the failed engine. Then he rotated it, activating the fire suppression system, halon gas flooding the engine compartment. Rebecca corrected the yaw, banking right to compensate for the dead engine. Her feet worked the rudder pedals, her hands firm on the yoke. The 767 was trying to turn left, and she had to physically force it to fly straight. She keyed the radio. "Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. Atlantic 229, we have a left engine failure and fire. Declaring an emergency. Requesting immediate vectors to the nearest suitable airport." The response came quickly from Shannon Control in Ireland, the air traffic facility that monitored the North Atlantic. Atlantic 229, Shannon Control. We copy your emergency. Shannon Airport is 340 miles at your 11 o'clock position. You're cleared direct. Descend and maintain flight level 200. Descending to 20,000 feet, Rebecca confirmed, easing the nose down. Atlantic 229, single engine operation. Single engine. They were trained for this exact scenario. Every commercial pilot practiced it in the simulator. One engine was enough to keep a 767 flying. It was serious, they'd have to make an emergency landing, the plane would be out of service for repairs, there'd be investigations and paperwork. But they could handle it. The aircraft was designed to fly on one engine. They'd land in Shannon, passengers would be safe, everyone would have a story to tell. Engine fire suppressed, Michael reported, scanning his instruments. Fire warning light is out. Left engine secured. Right engine is operating normally. All other systems nominal. We're good, Captain. Rebecca allowed herself a small breath of relief. Her shoulders relaxed slightly. Okay. We're 340 miles from Shannon. At this altitude and speed, we'll make it in about 40 minutes. Let's run the single-engine landing checklist. Michael pulled out the quick reference handbook, the thick emergency procedures manual that every commercial pilot hoped they'd never actually need to use. He flipped to the correct section. Single-engine approach, he read. Flaps 25 degrees. Approach speed 160 knots. Landing distance increased by approximately. He stopped mid-sentence. His eyes locked on an instrument gauge. Captain. Right engine fuel flow is dropping. Rebecca's eyes snapped to the fuel flow indicators. Numbers that should have been steady were falling. What? How is that possible? I don't know. Michael's voice had an edge of concern now. Fuel pressure to the right engine is falling. Fast. It's already down 15%. This didn't make sense. The Boeing 767 had independent fuel systems for each engine. They were designed with multiple redundancies. Separate tanks. Separate pumps. Separate lines. Both engines couldn't fail. The aircraft was specifically engineered to prevent exactly this scenario. Switch to the backup fuel pump, Rebecca ordered, her mind racing through the systems. Already on it. Michael's hands were flying over the fuel system panel. Backup pump activated. Crossfeed valve open. It's not helping. We're still losing fuel pressure across all tanks. Rebecca's heart rate spiked. Her hands started sweating on the yoke. That's impossible. Independent fuel systems. This can't happen. The right engine sputtered. The sound was unmistakable. A cough in the steady roar. Like the engine was choking. It sputtered again. Coughed. The power output dropped. And then the right engine died. Complete silence except for wind noise and the sound of passengers screaming in the cabin behind them. Rebecca and Michael stared at each other in absolute horror. All the color had drained from Michael's face. Both engines, he whispered. Both engines just flamed out. We're gliding. Rebecca forced herself to think. Panic wouldn't help. Panic would kill everyone. She needed to calculate their options. Her training took over. Emergency procedures. Problem-solving, mathematics. Okay, she said, her voice shaking slightly despite her efforts to stay calm. Boeing 767 glide ratio is 12:1. That's the standard. We're at 28,000 feet right now. That's 5.3 miles of altitude. Times 12, Michael finished, his fingers punching numbers into the flight management computer. 63 miles. We can glide approximately 63 miles before we hit the water. Shannon is 340 miles away. They both stared at the navigation display. The green line showing their flight path. The airport symbol so far away it might as well have been on the moon. The math was brutal and undeniable. Simple physics. They weren't going to make it. Not even close. They'd run out of altitude more than 270 miles short of the runway. Michael tried restarting the engines. It was the only option. Fuel pumps on. Crossfeed confirmed. Ignition switches to start position, negative. No restart. Engines won't turn over. No ignition. He tried again. Same procedure. Same result. Nothing. Rebecca keyed the emergency frequency. Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking on the yoke. Mayday, 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 Atlantic 229. We have dual engine failure. Both engines have flamed out. Unable to restart. 289 souls on board. Current position is 51.2 degrees north, 22.8 degrees west. Silence on the radio. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. Rebecca could picture the controller staring at his screen in disbelief. Then, Atlantic 229, Shannon control. Confirm, did you say both engines have failed? Affirmative, Shannon. Both engines are dead. Completely flamed out. We're gliding. We cannot reach any airport. Another pause, longer this time. When the controller spoke again, his voice was very carefully controlled. Professional. But Rebecca could hear the shock underneath. Atlantic 229, copy. Stand by. 30 seconds passed. Rebecca watched the altimeter unwind. 27,000 feet. 26,500. They were descending at about 800 feet per minute. Every second that passed was altitude they'd never get back. The controller came back. Atlantic 229, nearest landfall is 340 miles from your position. Faroe Islands are 290 miles north-northeast, but you have insufficient glide range for either option. Recommend you prepare for water ditching. Coast Guard has been notified. Rescue assets are being scrambled. Water ditching. The words hit Rebecca like a physical blow to the stomach. She felt sick. Lightheaded. She'd been flying commercial aircraft for 28 years. Tens of thousands of hours. She'd landed in crosswinds that bent landing gear. She'd handled hydraulic failures, electrical problems, pressurization issues. She'd flown through thunderstorms and ice. She'd never ditched. She'd barely even trained for it, one simulator session years ago during her initial 767 qualification. She tried to remember what she'd learned. Put the plane down gently. Keep the wings level. Don't let the nose dig in. That was it. That was all she remembered. Water temperature in the North Atlantic in October was 54 degrees Fahrenheit. She knew that from safety briefings. Survival time before hypothermia set in was about 15 minutes. Maybe 20 if you were lucky and in good physical condition. 289 people on this plane. Passengers and crew, families, children, elderly people. Most of them would die even if they survived the impact. The cold water would kill them while they waited for rescue. Michael was pale, his hands visibly shaking on the control panel. Rebecca, I don't know how to ditch. They didn't teach us this in any detail. One simulator session 5 years ago, that's all I've got. I don't remember anything useful. Neither do I, Rebecca admitted. Her voice cracked slightly. But we're about to learn. She keyed the PA system. Tried to keep her voice calm, professional. Like this was just another announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Torres. We have experienced a dual engine failure. Both engines have stopped operating. We are unable to reach an airport. We will be conducting an emergency water landing in the Atlantic Ocean. Flight attendants, initiate ditching procedures immediately. Passengers, please follow all crew instructions carefully. Brace positions will be called shortly. Please remain calm. The cabin erupted in screams and crying. Rebecca could hear it even through the cockpit door. She looked at Michael. We have maybe 7 minutes before we hit the water. I need ideas. Anything you remember from training. Michael was frantically scanning the emergency procedures manual, flipping through pages with shaking hands. Ditching checklist, okay, here it is. Flaps 30 degrees. Landing gear up, definitely up, or we'll flip. Airspeed 140 knots at impact. Angle of attack. He paused, squinting at the small print. It just says, minimum descent rate. That's it. It doesn't say what angle. It doesn't explain how. What does minimum descent rate mean? I have no idea, Michael said helplessly. As flat as possible. I don't know. Rebecca felt despair creeping in. They were going to crash. They had no idea how to land on water. The plane would break apart on impact. People would die. This was how her career would end, with hundreds of deaths and her name in the history books as the captain who crashed into the Atlantic. She closed her eyes. Tried to think, tried to remember anything from that simulator session years ago. Then someone pushed open the cockpit door. Jordan pushed into the cockpit without asking permission. Without knocking. The flight attendant had unlocked it for her after Jordan had explained, very clearly and very seriously, that she was a trained naval aviator who knew how to ditch. Rebecca and Michael were running through restart checklists, desperately trying to get the engines back online. The desperation was visible on their faces. Who the hell are you? Rebecca snapped without looking up from her instruments. You can't be in here. Get out. Commander Jordan Hayes, United States Navy, call sign Shark, Jordan said calmly, moving into the cramped cockpit space. I flew P-8 Poseidons for 12 years. Maritime patrol aircraft. I've trained for water ditching hundreds of times. I can help you survive this. Rebecca finally looked at her, really looked at her. This civilian woman in faded jeans and a gray hoodie, no uniform, no credentials visible, making an impossible claim. Your Navy. I was, Jordan said. Dishonorably discharged 18 months ago. But I spent 12 years flying maritime patrol over open ocean. We trained constantly for ditching scenarios because submarine rescue missions require it. Water landings in open ocean, heavy seas, zero visibility. I've done it in simulators hundreds of times. I've coordinated real water rescue operations dozens of times. And right now, I'm the only person on this plane who knows how to land on water without killing everyone. Michael checked the altimeter. Captain, we're at 24,000 feet. Descent rate is steady at 800 feet per minute. We have maybe 6 minutes before impact. Rebecca stared at Jordan for 3 seconds. The longest 3 seconds of Jordan's life. Protocol said civilians weren't allowed in the cockpit under any circumstances. Protocol said Rebecca was the captain and this was her responsibility alone. But Protocol was about to kill everyone on this plane. Rebecca made her decision. Tell me what to do. Jordan slid into the jump seat behind them, her eyes scanning the instruments with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd spent thousands of hours in military aircraft cockpits. The 767's layout was different from a P-8, but the basic principles were the same. First thing, stop trying to restart the engines, Jordan said firmly. They're not coming back. Something contaminated your fuel, that's the only way both engines fail like this. Accept that we're gliding. Focus everything on the ditching. She pointed at the airspeed indicator. Current speed is 240 knots. Way too fast. You need to slow down to 140 knots for impact. Any faster and the plane will break apart when it hits the water. The fuselage can't handle high-speed impact. But we're trying to maximize our glide range, Rebecca started. You're 280 miles from land, Jordan interrupted. You're not making it regardless of what you do. The math doesn't work. Forget about range. Forget about reaching an airport. Focus entirely on a survivable impact and getting everyone out alive afterward. Jordan reached forward and keyed the emergency radio frequency, 121.5 MHz, the international distress frequency that all rescue aircraft monitored. Coast Guard, any Black Hawk helicopters monitoring this frequency, this is Commander Jordan Hayes, call sign Shark, aboard Atlantic Airlines Flight 229. I'm coordinating water ditching procedures. Request immediate rescue asset positioning at coordinates 51.2 degrees north, 22.8 degrees west. We're ditching in approximately 5 minutes. Static crackled over the radio for a moment. Then a voice, shocked, disbelieving. Did you just say call sign shark? Affirmative, Jordan replied calmly. This is Talon Lead, Coast Guard Black Hawk out of Shannon. Confirming, are you Commander Jordan Hayes? The shark? Yes. I'm aboard as a passenger. Both pilots are alive and capable, but neither has ditching experience. I'm coordinating the landing procedure. I need rescue assets positioned 2 miles downwind of our impact point. Survivors will drift east with the ocean current. We'll have approximately 90 seconds from impact to full evacuation before the aircraft sinks completely. A long pause. Then a different voice came over the radio, older, more authoritative. Shark, this is Captain Jake Martinez, Talon Lead. I know who you are. We flew together during that joint training exercise in Norway, 4 years ago. We're currently 180 miles out from your position, inbound at maximum speed. We'll be overhead in 28 minutes. Jordan remembered Martinez. Good pilot. Solid guy. We'll be in the water in 5 minutes, Jake. Be ready. This is going to be the biggest ocean rescue you've ever coordinated. Roger that, Shark. We're launching 2 additional Black Hawks. Coast Guard cutter is changing course to your position. We'll be ready. Rebecca glanced back at Jordan with a mix of hope and fear. They know you? Yeah, Jordan said. They know me. Now let's make sure we're all alive when they get here. At 18,000 feet, Jordan started walking Rebecca through the ditching procedure. Her voice was calm, steady, authoritative. The voice of someone who'd done this before, even if only in simulators. Listen very carefully, Jordan said. Angle of impact is everything. It's the difference between everyone living and everyone dying. If you come in too steep, nose down, the plane will nosedive straight into the water. The fuselage will crumple like a tin can. Instant death for everyone in the front section, probably the whole aircraft. If you come in too shallow, almost level, you'll skip across the water like a flat stone. The wings will catch and rip off. The fuselage will break apart. Same result. Everyone dies. So what's the right angle? Rebecca asked, her voice tight. 9 to 11 degrees nose up at impact, Jordan said. Exactly that range. Not 8 degrees. Not 12 degrees. 9 to 11. That's the sweet spot where the belly of the aircraft takes the impact without the nose digging in or the tail dragging. How do I judge that? Your attitude indicator, Jordan pointed at the instrument on the panel. I'll call it out for you. When I say flare, you pull back gently on the yoke and hold exactly 10 degrees nose up. Don't overcorrect. Don't fight the aircraft. Just hold it steady at 10 degrees. At 12,000 feet, extend flaps to 30 degrees. Rebecca moved the flap lever. The flaps extended from the trailing edge of the wings, increasing lift and drag. The plane slowed, the nose pitching down slightly from the increased drag. Good, Jordan said. Flaps create drag. We want to slow down. Speed kills in a water landing. At 10,000 feet, start your descent planning. We want to come in as flat as possible while maintaining that 10-degree nose-up angle at the moment of impact. At 8,000 feet, landing gear stays up. This is critical. Belly landing only. If you extend the landing gear, the wheels will catch the water and flip us upside down instantly. Gear up, always. Gear up, confirmed, Michael said, checking that the gear handle was in the up position. At 6,000 feet, airspeed is 170 knots. Continue slowing. Target is 140 at impact. Rebecca eased back on the yoke, trading speed for a slightly better glide angle. At 4,000 feet, everyone needs to be in brace positions. This is going to be extremely violent. The deceleration will be like hitting a brick wall. Rebecca keyed the PA system. Her voice was surprisingly steady. Flight attendants, prepare cabin for ditching. All passengers, brace positions now. Put your heads down, hands over your heads. Brace for impact. In the cabin, flight attendants were shouting instructions. Heads down. Stay down. Brace, brace, brace. Passengers leaned forward in their seats, heads between their knees, hands clasped over their heads. Some were crying. Some were praying. Parents held their children. At 2,000 feet, Jordan could see the ocean clearly through the windscreen. Gray water, whitecaps, cold and unforgiving. Airspeed 150 knots, Jordan said. Reduced to 145. We're almost there. At 1,000 feet, throttles to idle, oh wait, no engines. Never mind that. Jordan almost laughed at the absurdity. Okay, just let the plane settle naturally. At 500 feet, Jordan's voice became very calm and steady. Rebecca, listen to me. In about 20 seconds, I'm going to tell you to flare. When I do, you pull back gently on the yoke and hold exactly 10 degrees nose up. Not 9. Not 11. 10 degrees. Watch your attitude indicator. Hold it there no matter what. Don't let the nose drop. Don't pull back too much. Just hold 10 degrees. I understand, Rebecca said. Her knuckles were white on the yoke. At 200 feet, flaps are good. Attitude is good. Speed is 145 knots. Perfect. At 100 feet, get ready. Flare in 3, 2, 1. Flare now. Pull back gently. 10 degrees. There it is. Hold it. Rebecca pulled the yoke back smoothly. The nose lifted. The attitude indicator showed 10 degrees nose up. At 50 feet, the ocean was rushing up at them. Jordan could see individual waves. Hold it, she said calmly. Hold that angle. Don't let the nose drop. Don't pull back more. Just hold. The belly of the Boeing 767 slammed into the North Atlantic Ocean at 145 miles per hour. The impact felt like hitting solid concrete. The deceleration was instant and brutal. From 145 miles per hour to zero in less than 2 seconds. The force threw everyone forward against their seatbelts with crushing pressure. Overhead bins exploded open, raining luggage, bags, and belongings. Passengers screamed. The noise was deafening, metal grinding, water exploding against the fuselage, people crying out in pain and terror. But the fuselage stayed intact. The belly hit first, exactly as designed. The aircraft skipped once, actually bounced off the water like a stone, then slammed down again and settled. For 1 second, everything was silent except for the groaning of stressed metal. Then water started pouring in. Stress cracks in the fuselage. Seams that had failed under the impact, window seals that had broken, water flooding into the cabin at an alarming rate, rising around passengers' feet. Jordan was already moving. She unbuckled from the jump seat and ran toward the main cabin. Evacuate, she shouted at the top of her lungs. We have 90 seconds before this plane sinks completely. Move now. Out the exits. Go. She reached the nearest emergency exit, door 2 left. Grabbed the handle, pulled hard. The door blew off with a bang. The inflatable evacuation slide deployed automatically, hitting the water and inflating into a bright yellow slide raft combination. Go. 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 Jordan yelled at the passengers who were frozen in shock, staring at the water rising around their legs. An elderly man was struggling with his seatbelt, his hands shaking too much to press the release button. Jordan reached over, pressed it for him, and physically pulled him out of his seat. Out. Move, she shouted, pushing him toward the exit. She physically grabbed people and shoved them toward the slide. A middle-aged woman was paralyzed with fear, unable to move. Jordan lifted her, smaller than Jordan expected, and carried her to the exit, helping her onto the slide. Water was waist-deep now. Rising fast. The plane was sinking. Flight attendants throughout the cabin were doing the same thing. Shouting, helping people, following their training even as water rose around them. They were heroes, Jordan thought. Every single one of them. Jordan saw a young mother, maybe 30 years old, struggling with two small children, maybe 5 and 7 years old. They were trapped in their seats by jammed seatbelts. The buckles had been damaged in the impact. The mother was screaming, pulling at the belts with desperate strength, but they wouldn't release. Jordan waded through the freezing water, already chest deep, grabbed an emergency knife from the wall-mounted kit, and cut the seatbelts. Out! Now! Follow me, she shouted. The mother grabbed both children. Jordan helped lift the younger one. They waded through the water to the nearest exit. Jordan did a quick visual sweep of her section. Empty seats. Everyone was out or being helped by flight attendants. She was one of the last people in the cabin. The water was chest deep. Rising to her neck. The plane was tilting forward, nose sinking. She took a deep breath and dove through the exit, into the freezing ocean. Behind her, the Boeing 767 tilted sharply nose down. The tail lifted into the air, pointing at the sky. Water rushed into the cabin through every opening. The plane sank in 2 minutes and 14 seconds. 289 passengers and crew were floating in the North Atlantic Ocean. Life vests inflated, keeping heads above water. Emergency slides serving as life rafts, holding groups of passengers. But the water was 54 degrees Fahrenheit. Hypothermia set in immediately. Jordan felt it herself, the shocking cold that took her breath away. Her muscles started shivering violently, her body's automatic response trying to generate heat. People around her were already in trouble. The elderly were losing consciousness. Children were crying uncontrollably. Some passengers hadn't inflated their life vests properly and were struggling to stay afloat. Jordan's Navy training kicked in automatically. Assess. Organize. Act. Everyone stay together, she shouted over the wind and waves. Link arms. Form groups. Generate body heat. Don't spread out. She swam to a group of passengers who were drifting apart. Link arms. Stay together. Your body heat will keep each other warmer. She saw Captain Rebecca clinging to a piece of debris, part of an overhead bin that had floated out during the evacuation. Blood was running down Rebecca's face from a head wound above her eyebrow. But she was conscious. Alert. Jordan swam over to her. You did it, she said, her teeth already chattering from the cold. You saved us. Perfect landing. Rebecca's teeth were chattering too. Not yet. We're in the middle of the ocean. People are freezing. Where's that Coast Guard you called? Coming, Jordan said, looking at her watch. The crystal was cracked but it still worked. We've been in the water for 3 minutes. They'll be here in 25 minutes. We have to keep people alive until then. Jordan swam through the groups of survivors, counting heads. Making sure everyone had a functioning life vest. Pulling people who were drifting away back to the main group. She found an elderly woman, maybe 70 years old, barely conscious, her lips already blue. Jordan swam her over to a group of younger passengers. Hold her between you. Jordan shouted. Keep her head above water. Share body heat. A teenage boy was hyperventilating, panicking. Jordan grabbed his shoulders. Look at me, she said firmly. Look at my eyes. Breathe with me. In, out, in, out. You're doing great. Help is coming. I need you to stay calm and help the people around you. Can you do that? The boy nodded, his breathing slowing. Jordan kept moving. Kept organizing. Kept people together and focused on survival instead of panic. Her own body was screaming in protest. The cold was painful. Her fingers were going numb. Her core temperature was dropping. But she kept moving because stopping meant dying, and dying meant failing everyone who was depending on her. Then she heard it. The most beautiful sound in the world. Helicopter rotors. Chief Warrant Officer Jake Martinez brought his Black Hawk into a hover over the crash site. Below him, hundreds of people were in the water, clinging to life rafts and debris. The scene looked like something from a disaster movie. Talon lead to all aircraft, we have visual on survivors, Martinez radioed. Beginning extraction now. Rescue swimmers, you're cleared to deploy. 3 Coast Guard rescue swimmers dove from the helicopters into the freezing water. They wore dry suits with thermal protection. But even with specialized gear, they had maybe 30 minutes before hypothermia affected them too. Martinez scanned the water, looking for Jordan. He'd known her for years, had flown with her during joint Navy Coast Guard exercises. She'd been legendary even then. Pulled off a submarine rescue in weather that had grounded every other aircraft. He'd watched her coordinate operations with a calm precision that made admirals look incompetent. And now she was in the water, just another survivor who needed rescue. He spotted her. She was swimming between groups of passengers, organizing them, keeping them together. Even now, even freezing to death, she was still leading. Shark, this is Talon lead, Martinez radioed. We see you. Starting extraction now. More helicopters appeared on the horizon. Coast Guard cutters were racing toward the crash site from Shannon and from ships that had been diverted. Commercial vessels were changing course to help. Within minutes, it became the largest ocean rescue operation in the North Atlantic in decades. One by one, survivors were pulled from the freezing water. The rescue swimmers worked with incredible efficiency. Children first, then elderly, then injured, then everyone else. Hypothermic passengers were loaded into rescue baskets and lifted into helicopters. Traumatized but alive. The helicopter crews worked in rotation. Extract a load of survivors, usually 4 or 5 at a time, fly them to the nearest Coast Guard cutter where medical teams were waiting, then return for more. Again and again. The precision was beautiful. Jordan refused to be rescued. Every time a rescue swimmer approached her, she pointed to other passengers who needed help more. Kids first, she shouted over the rotor noise. Elderly. Injured. I'm fine. Ma'am, you need to get out of the water, a young rescue swimmer, couldn't have been more than 25, shouted at her. You've been in here for 20 minutes. Not until everyone else is out, Jordan shouted back, her lips blue, her whole body shaking violently from the cold. The rescue swimmer looked at her like she was crazy. Then he saw her eyes, calm, focused, determined. He nodded and swam to help an elderly man who was losing consciousness. 30 minutes into the rescue, Jordan was in serious trouble. She could barely feel her hands and feet. Her core temperature had dropped dangerously low. Her thinking was getting fuzzy, one of the first signs of severe hypothermia. But she kept counting. Kept organizing. Kept making sure everyone was accounted for. Finally, Martinez's voice came over the rescue swimmer's radio. Get Shark out of that water right now. That's a direct order. She's done enough. 2 rescue swimmers grabbed Jordan and pulled her into a rescue basket despite her protests. She tried to resist. Everyone accounted for, she managed to say through chattering teeth that clicked together so hard she could barely form words. 289 passengers. 13 crew members, Martinez confirmed from the helicopter. All accounted for. You're the last one, Shark. Everyone else is out. Jordan nodded weakly. 0 fatalities. 0 fatalities, Martinez confirmed. You just pulled off a miracle. Martinez himself pulled her into the helicopter. wrapped her in thermal blankets. Her skin was pale, almost gray. Her lips were blue. She was shaking so hard she couldn't hold a cup of hot coffee they offered her. "Not a miracle," she managed to say, her voice barely a whisper. "Just, training." A Coast Guard paramedic started treating her for hypothermia. Warm blankets, warm floor fluids, careful rewarming to prevent cardiac arrest. Jordan closed her eyes. Let herself finally stop fighting. Let the warmth slowly return to her frozen body. Everyone was safe. Everyone was alive. That was all that mattered. Within 24 hours, National Transportation Safety Board investigator Sarah Mitchell was standing on the deck of the Coast Guard cutter, Vigilant, examining debris recovered from the crash site. Pieces of the fuselage, seat cushions, luggage. And most importantly, fuel samples collected by rescue ships that had pumped residual fuel from the floating wreckage before it sank completely. Sarah had been investigating aircraft accidents for 15 years. She'd seen crashes caused by mechanical failure, pilot error, weather, design flaws. But she'd never seen anything like this fuel sample. She held up a glass vial containing what should have been clear jet fuel. Instead, it was cloudy. Contaminated. "What am I looking at?" she asked the Coast Guard chemist who'd analyzed it. "Massive contamination," the chemist replied, showing her the lab results. "Biological fungus, the kind that grows in fuel tanks when water gets in. But also deliberate additives. Water, sediment, particulates, this isn't accidental contamination from poor storage. Someone put this stuff in the fuel deliberately." "You're sure?" "Absolutely. The concentration levels are way too high for natural contamination. And look at this," he pointed to another analysis. "Metal shavings, aluminum particles. You don't get aluminum in jet fuel naturally. Someone added it." Sarah felt sick. This wasn't an accident. This was sabotage. Someone had deliberately contaminated the fuel for Flight 229, knowing it would cause engine failure, knowing 289 people were on board. This was attempted mass murder. She immediately contacted the FBI. Within hours, federal agents were at Boston Logan Airport, pulling security footage and interviewing ground crew. They traced the fuel for Flight 229 back to the airport's tank farm, massive underground tanks that stored thousands of gallons of jet fuel. Security footage showed a maintenance contractor accessing Tank 7, the tank that fueled Flight 229, at 11:47 p.m. the night before the flight. The contractor spent 43 minutes inside the tank access area. That was unusual. Normal inspections took maybe 15 minutes. The contractor's name was David Sullivan. He worked for a company called Apex Ground Services. FBI agents arrested him at his apartment in South Boston 36 hours after the crash. They found evidence in his garage, empty containers that had held fungal agents, metal shavings, detailed notes about fuel tank access procedures. Sullivan broke during interrogation. Confessed everything. He'd been paid $50,000 to contaminate the fuel. Paid by someone he'd never met in person. All communication through encrypted messages and cryptocurrency payments. But investigators kept digging. Followed the money, tracked the cryptocurrency transactions through multiple digital wallets and exchanges. They found the source. Atlantic Airlines executives, 5 of them, including the chief financial officer and the vice president of operations. The reason, a passenger on Flight 229 was carrying evidence that would destroy them. Michael Brennan, senior fuel quality inspector for Atlantic Airlines. He discovered that the airline had been falsifying fuel quality inspections for 3 years. They'd been skipping the required testing to save money, about $5,000 per test, hundreds of tests per year. The savings added up to millions. But skipping fuel quality tests meant they couldn't detect contamination. Couldn't ensure fuel met safety standards. Couldn't prevent exactly what happened to Flight 229. Brennan had been gathering evidence for months. Documented everything, built an airtight case. He was flying to London to meet with FAA investigators and turn over everything he had. Atlantic Airlines executives found out about his plans. They panicked. Decided that killing Brennan, and everyone else on Flight 229, was preferable to criminal prosecution and bankruptcy. They ordered the fuel contamination. Made it look like an accident. Crashed the plane. Kill the whistleblower. Destroy the evidence. Within 72 hours of the investigation beginning, 5 Atlantic Airlines executives were arrested and charged with conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder of 289 people, corporate sabotage, and fraud. David Sullivan was charged as an accomplice. Atlantic Airlines stock price collapsed. The company filed for bankruptcy within a week. Michael Brennan, who'd survived the ditching and the freezing water, testified before Congress about corporate corruption in the airline industry. His testimony led to new regulations and mandatory oversight. The story dominated international news for weeks. The miracle ditching where everyone survived, the corporate conspiracy to commit mass murder, the disgraced Navy pilot who saved hundreds of lives. And at the center of it all was Jordan Hayes. The media descended on Jordan like a hurricane. Reporters camped outside her apartment building. Camera crews followed her to the grocery store. Her phone rang constantly with interview requests. The coverage was mostly positive. Hero pilot saves 289 lives. Disgraced Navy commander proves them wrong. Call sign Shark returns. But some reporters dug deeper. Found the dishonorable discharge. The court-martial records, the controversy that had ended her career. 3 days after the rescue, Jordan held a press conference at the request of the Coast Guard. She didn't want to. Hated the attention. But the Coast Guard public affairs officer convinced her that her story could help change things. She stood at a podium in a Coast Guard facility in Shannon, Ireland. Wore simple civilian clothes, slacks and a button-down shirt. No uniform. No military bearing. Just a woman who'd done what needed to be done. A reporter from the New York Times asked the question everyone wanted answered. Commander Hayes, you were dishonorably discharged from the Navy 18 months ago. Can you explain why? Jordan looked directly at the camera. Didn't hesitate. I was assigned to investigate a crash that killed 3 sailors. I found that the cause was faulty maintenance from a defense contractor called Daedalus Systems. They'd falsified inspection records on critical hydraulic components to save time and money. One of those components failed. 3 people died because of corporate fraud. She paused. Let that sink in. My superior officers ordered me to change my investigation report. They told me to blame pilot error instead of the contractor. Daedalus had a $7 billion contract with the Navy. Powerful political connections. My superiors said protecting that relationship was more important than the truth. Another pause. Her voice was steady. Calm. But everyone could hear the anger underneath. I refused to lie. I filed my report exactly as the evidence showed. Contractor negligence, corporate fraud. 3 preventable deaths. 2 weeks later, the Navy dishonorably discharged me for insubordination. A reporter from CNN, do you regret refusing to follow orders? Jordan's answer was immediate. I regret that the Navy values protecting defense contractors over telling the truth. I regret that 3 sailors' families were told their sons and husbands died because of pilot error when that was a lie. But I don't regret refusing to participate in that lie. She gestured at the room full of reporters. Today I saved 289 people using skills the Navy said I didn't deserve to have. Using training the Navy tried to erase. That's my answer to whether I regret my choices. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Veterans groups rallied to her defense. Started petitions demanding the Navy review her case. Organized protests outside the Pentagon. Congressional representatives called for investigations into the Navy's handling of whistleblower reports. Social media exploded with support. Hashtag #SharkWasRight trended worldwide. The three sailors' families, who'd been told for years that their loved ones died due to pilot error, came forward. Demanded justice. Demanded the truth Jordan had tried to give them. Public pressure forced the Navy to act. 2 weeks later, the Secretary of the Navy announced a full review of Jordan's case and the original crash investigation she'd conducted. 1 month after that, the results were announced. Jordan's dishonorable discharge was expunged from her record. Completely erased. Full military honors were restored. Her rank of commander was reinstated. 12 years of back pay, over $400,000, was awarded. Her call sign, Shark, was officially reinstated in Navy records. The Secretary of the Navy issued a public statement that was read at a press conference. Commander Hayes was punished for having integrity and courage. She was punished for telling the truth when powerful people wanted her to lie. That was wrong. Profoundly wrong. Today we correct that injustice. The Navy failed Commander Hayes. She never failed us or the sailors she served with. Additionally, the 3 sailors who died in the crash were honored posthumously. The crash investigation was officially changed to blame contractor negligence. Daedalus Systems was charged with negligent homicide and fraud. Their Navy contracts were terminated. 3 executives went to prison. New regulations were implemented requiring independent investigation of all military aircraft accidents, with protections for whistleblowers. Jordan received official offers from the Navy. Full reinstatement, promotion to captain, teaching position at the Naval Academy. They wanted her back. She also received offers from every major airline. Chief pilot positions, safety director roles, consulting contracts worth millions. Book deals. Movie rights, speaking tours. Everyone wanted a piece of the hero pilot. Jordan turned down almost everything. 6 months after the ditching, Jordan stood on the deck of a Coast Guard cutter off the coast of Ireland, teaching water ditching techniques to a class of 40 commercial pilots from airlines across Europe and North America. Captain Rebecca Torres sat in the front row, taking notes like she was back in flight school. Jordan pointed at the diagram displayed on a screen behind her. A cross-section of an aircraft hitting water at various angles. The key is angle of attack at the moment of impact, Jordan explained. 10 degrees nose up. Not 8 degrees. Not 12 degrees. Exactly 10. That 2-degree margin is literally the difference between everyone living and everyone dying. She walked the pilots through the entire procedure. When to extend flaps. Why landing gear must absolutely stay up. How to judge altitude over water when you have no visual references. What to do in the first 90 seconds after impact. How to evacuate a sinking aircraft, how to organize survivors in the water. Everything she'd learned through hundreds of simulator sessions. Everything she'd applied when it mattered most. The pilots took notes. Asked questions. Later they'd practice in advanced simulators that Jordan had helped design, simulators that accurately modeled water ditching scenarios. After the class ended, Rebecca approached Jordan. They'd stayed in touch over the past 6 months. Had become friends. "You saved my life," Rebecca said. It wasn't the first time she'd said it, and it wouldn't be the last. "My crew .my passengers. 289 people are alive because you refused to stay in your seat." "You did the flying," Jordan replied. She always deflected the credit. "You had the courage to listen to a civilian stranger in jeans instead of following protocol that said I shouldn't be in the cockpit. You trusted me. That took guts. Will you go back to the Navy?" Rebecca asked. "They want you back. Full honors. Probably fast-track to Admiral if you wanted it." Jordan looked out at the ocean. The same ocean that had almost claimed 289 lives. The same ocean she'd been trained to respect, to understand, to survive. "No," she said finally. "I don't need the Navy to be shark. Call signs aren't given by institutions or written on uniforms. They're earned through actions. Through who you are when everything goes wrong. She turned back to Rebecca. The Navy gave me training. Gave me skills. But Shark, that's not something they gave me. That's who I am. With or without a uniform, with or without their permission. What will you do? This, Jordan gestured at the classroom, the training materials, the pilots who were still asking questions. Teaching, consulting, making sure that the next time a plane goes down over water, and eventually one will, the pilots know exactly what to do. Making sure more people survive. She smiled. Turns out you don't need a uniform to save lives. You don't need rank or medals or official approval. You just need to know your stuff and care enough about people to act when it matters. Rebecca nodded. The Hayes Protocol. That's what the FAA officially calls your technique now. I heard, Jordan said. Mandatory training for all commercial pilots worldwide. The FAA regulation in the United States. EASA requirement in Europe. CAA in the UK, every major aviation authority. Zero fatality ocean ditching, Rebecca said. You proved it was possible. Before Flight 229, conventional wisdom said most people would die in a water landing. Now we know different. Jordan looked at the ocean again. Watched the waves. The Navy threw me away because I wouldn't lie. They said I wasn't worthy of wearing the uniform. They tried to erase 12 years of service like it never happened. But 289 people are alive today because you had those skills, Rebecca said. Exactly, Jordan agreed. The Navy tried to punish me by taking away my career. But they couldn't take away my training. My experience my judgment my ability to act when lives depended on it. Call sign Shark, Rebecca said. It really does fit you perfectly. Yeah, Jordan said. It does. And here's what the Navy never understood, sharks don't ask permission. We don't need institutions to validate us. We don't need official approval to do what needs to be done. We just act. She turned back to Rebecca, and her expression was serious. I spent 12 years hunting submarines. Tracking enemy vessels, coordinating rescues. Now I hunt different prey, preventable tragedies. Corporate negligence, fraud. All the things that kill people because someone decided profits or politics mattered more than lives. You're still fighting. Always, Jordan said. Just change the battlefield. The ocean doesn't care about rank. Doesn't care about politics. Doesn't care who signed your discharge papers or what's written on your service record. It only cares about competence. About truth. About courage when everything's on the line. The Navy made a mistake letting you go. Jordan shook her head. No. The Navy made a choice. They chose politics over integrity. They chose protecting a defense contractor over honoring 3 dead sailors. I made a different choice. And even knowing how much it cost me, even knowing I lost everything, I'd make the same choice again. Because it was right. Because it was right, Jordan confirmed. And because being Shark means more than wearing a uniform. It means doing what needs to be done, regardless of the cost. The Hayes Protocol became standard training for every commercial pilot worldwide. Jordan's water ditching technique was studied in aviation schools, refined by engineers, taught in every flight simulator facility. Zero fatality ocean ditching. Before Flight 229, it had been theoretical. Now it was proven. Documented, repeatable. Jordan had changed commercial aviation forever. She never went back to the Navy. Didn't need to. Didn't want to. She consulted for airlines worldwide, teaching advanced safety protocols. She testified before Congress multiple times about corporate fraud in aviation, about the importance of protecting whistleblowers, about putting safety ahead of profits. She helped rewrite FAA regulations. Influenced EASA policy. Worked with ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization, to establish global standards. She saved lives without flying a single mission. Saved more lives through teaching and advocacy than she ever could have in a cockpit. The Black Hawk pilots who'd rescued Flight 229 survivors still told stories about call sign Shark in Coast Guard ready rooms. How she'd stayed in the freezing water for 30 minutes while everyone else was evacuated. How she'd organized the survivors with the same calm precision she'd used hunting submarines. How she'd refused rescue until every single passenger was accounted for. That's what a real pilot looks like, they'd say to new recruits. That's what we're trying to be. Captain Rebecca Torres kept a framed photo in her cockpit. Jordan, soaking wet, wrapped in thermal blankets in the back of Martinez's Black Hawk, giving a thumbs up to the camera despite hypothermia. Rebecca showed it to every new first officer she flew with. That woman saved my life and 288 other people, she'd say. She did it by refusing to accept that civilians couldn't help. By ignoring the rule book when the rule book was wrong. Remember that the next time you're facing an emergency. Sometimes the right answer comes from unexpected places. The businessman from Seat 14C, his name was Richard Chen, started a foundation that funded aviation safety research. He donated $5 million. He'd been 3 feet from a hero for hours and never knew it until she saved his life. The sleeping woman from Seat 14A, Patricia Morrison, retired teacher, became Jordan's close friend. They met for coffee once a month when Jordan was in Boston. Patricia always said the same thing, "I slept through my own death and woke up alive because of you. That's a gift I can never repay." Michael Brennan, the whistleblower whose evidence had brought down Atlantic Airlines executives, testified at their criminal trial. All 5 executives were convicted. Sentenced to federal prison, terms ranging from 15 to 25 years. Commercial aviation became measurably safer because one woman refused to falsify a report. Because 3 sailors' deaths weren't covered up and forgotten, because the truth mattered more than a career. Jordan Shark Hayes proved something that powerful institutions try very hard to deny. Individual integrity matters. Individual courage matters. One person telling the truth can change everything. The Navy said she wasn't worthy. 289 people knew different. Call signs transcend institutions. They're not given by bureaucrats or written on official documents. They're earned through action, through character, through who you are when nobody's watching and everything's on the line. Legends don't need uniforms. Don't need rank or medals or official recognition. They just need to be ready when the moment comes. And when Flight 229's engines died at 28,000 feet, 340 miles from land, with 289 souls aboard, Jordan was ready. She'd been training her entire life for that moment. Not because anyone ordered her to. Not because it would restore her reputation or give her back what the Navy took. Because it was right. Because she could. Because people needed her. And somewhere over the North Atlantic, in the flight path where 289 people should have died but didn't, call sign Shark still hunts. Still protects. Still saves lives. Not because she has to. Not because anyone gave her permission. But because that's what sharks do. And that's what legends are made of.